Alright, what's up everybody? My name is Galdrum. I promised everyone on X that I would do a YouTube video breaking down why CIG likes the gray market. And in this video, I'm going to try to use illustrations, try to explain it to the best I can as someone kind of understands the economics of business in the background, and also hopefully explain a little bit about supply and demand and how that works in a scenario and market like this. So let's get into it. All right, so why does CIG like the gray market? And for those of you who may be watching who maybe don't quite understand what the gray market is, or maybe don't understand what whole limited ships are in Star Citizen, it's essentially a thing that CIG does on their pledge store that allows you to buy certain ships. Typically they're either rare or they're really large, and their reasoning generally is that they don't want massive quantities of these supposed to be rare ships floating around in the verse. Now, that's another whole topic by itself around the whole like rarity problem, which I'll touch on a little bit later, but it's sticky. It's not something I like at all. A lot of people don't like it. It's one of those scenarios where if you don't benefit from it and you're not one of the very lucky few who get to benefit out and you beat the bots and you beat the scalpers, then you probably love it. And if you're anyone else, you probably don't like it. So I'm going to break down why they do that and why they don't just keep selling these $1,900 ships at unlimited paces. And it's really interesting business, I guess equation you could call it. One of the biggest reasons I like Star Citizen is not necessarily about Star Citizen. It's about CIG and their business model, which I find fascinating with how atypical it is compared to any other game studio. So let's break it down. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna put CIG in their own box over here. Don't mind my horrible drawing. My drawing is bad. So for this, we need to create a almost semicircle. We're gonna do something like this. And we're gonna go, oh, nope, actually we don't want that. All right, so here's the reason why I'm not doing a full circle. Because a full circle would mean it's a closed loop, meaning that the players, in this case, control the market. But they don't. CIG does. And they have developed a masterful business strategy to profit wildly off of the gray market. And the gray market, which I realized I didn't explain, gray market is essentially a third-party website or company that allows different players to like buy and sell things, because in the game you can gift things to other players, but you can only do it once. And so that allows for real money transactions. And sometimes that's used for bad things, and sometimes it's used to just buy and sell ships to each other, which is fine. I don't personally have an issue with the gray market if that's what it was, but it's not quite that. It's really a CIG money making tool. So this is not a closed loop because CIG actively contributes to this loop, it starts and it ends with CIG. And I'm gonna get into it here very soon. All right, so we need to list out the other players that are involved in this. So first off, we'll do, this will be the gray market. So we'll do G. Jeez, I cannot draw. This is your gray market. Your next player is going to be buyer number 1. So we'll do B1 over here. Now, in a typical loop, what you are going to see is you're going to see CIG release, let's call it the Idris, which they love to do now. So say they want to throw in the Idris, they want to put it up for sale. I think it was literally just for sale yesterday, out of the blue. So the Idris is a whole limited ship. It sells for 1,900 store credit and I believe 1,600 war bond. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. But I know it's 1,900 store credit, and I know because I've been trying to get one. So CIG, what they do is they use a wave system. And this wave system basically means, and every time it's a little bit different, but usually it's on the same premise. It's typically somewhere between 4 to 6 waves. I know yesterday's was 6 waves. And so they'll do 6 waves and an unknown amount of inventory. So players have no idea how much they're competing for. Are we competing for 5 ships? Are we competing for 100? Are we competing for 5,000? We have no idea. And that's step number 1 to this whole genius plan. So what happens is they usually start at 11 a.m. Eastern time in the US here, which is where I'm at. So at 11 a.m. Eastern, their website refreshes, it drops these ships, whole limited, and they are bought up like that, instantly. It is so fast that I've had literal teams of people sitting here on multiple devices that I have, spam refreshing as fast as we can, and we cannot complete it fast enough. It literally, and I kid you guys not, less than in 1 minute, they're typically sold out. The only time that's not true is the war bond. Sometimes the war bond will go for like 3, 4, 5 minutes because that's new cash that you have to spend. You can't just use your store credit. So they go insanely fast. Demand is here. Supply is here. There's this massive gap in the middle of players who want them versus players who have them and can get them. So the Idris comes in, and now generally what is believed to have been happening is that people are using bots. And I don't just think this, I know this. I've literally had people I know within the community show me the bots they're using. Even though CIG seems to like be saying that bots aren't getting used, that is just simply not true. I've literally seen the proof with my own 2 eyes. So players are using bots and scalping tools, just like they do in like the GPU markets and anything really of rare, limited quantity that people want because they know it appreciates in value. They use bots and they use scalping tools. So CIG releases a batch of Idris. Let's say they drop 100. So we'll do, they release 100 Idris. Let's say that 80 of these, or actually no, that seems like a lot. We'll do 50 of these go to the gray market. So now we've got up here, we've got 50. So now 50 is our inventory. 50 ships has now entered the gray market, meaning that players have bought the Idris and are immediately trying to turn it around and sell it. And generally, you're trying to sell it for real cash. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any other way to transfer a ship on the gray markets except for real cash or some kind of cryptocurrency. So you got 50 Idris to enter in. So they enter the gray market pool. They then get bought up almost instantly. Like for example, we'll pull this up here. We'll go the impound since I know that's a popular one. All right, Ships and vehicles. Let's look. Let's see what they got for Idris right now. So we've got people selling paints. We've got someone selling an account with a Javelin, Idris, or Kraken, an F8C, and a Saber Raven for $8,000. We have an account. We have an account. Account. Conversion kits, accounts that are sold out. I mean, look, like $1,500, $1,800, 3K sold out. And just look, these are all accounts that are sold out that have the Idris on them. Sold out. I mean, it just keeps going. And there's multiple websites that do this. Yep, it just keeps going. Yep, so you guys get the picture. There's limited supply in the gray market and a lot of demand. Some of these big dollar signs come through the gray market and they get bought up. It's ridiculous. So, a lot of these go to the gray market. A lot of them, almost all of them, are going to get bought up within a day or two. Probably faster. I don't know quite how fast they go in the gray, but it's very fast. Like, I basically never see them in stock when I go, especially just the standalone ship itself. And here's why. Because you can't sell an item that was bought with store credit. So if you go and, like, if I got the Idris I want, which is the store credit one, that's not a ship I can sell in the gray market because I use credit on that. I did not use new cash. So what has to happen is, if in order for you to pull your money back out, you have to sell the entire account. And that's kind of part of this whole scheme, which is why on that website I just showed you, all of those are accounts, because they're selling a combination of items that have been bought with credit that they can no longer gift to people. So the only way to get their money back out is to sell the entire account, which is not hard to do. A lot of games sell accounts. So back to this, I keep getting distracted. 50 Idris come in, they go to the gray market. Almost all of them, if not all of them, go to buyer one. Very rarely are they just sitting in the store. So real quick, now the gray market is profiting off of this, whatever company it might be. These guys are profiting. They make money. But guess who also just made a lot of money? CIG over here, who sold all these Idris. The CIG is loving life. They just made a couple $1,000, 50, 60, $100,000. Who knows what it is? And that's if we're playing with these numbers here. The numbers are higher, and they make a lot more. Now the gray market makes money. The sellers who are on the gray market, they make money. And now it goes to buyer one. Now here is where the big quote-unquote red flags with this system are, and why it works so well for CIG. Because here, the inventory dies. And what do I mean by that? Because you can only sell things once, and you can only gift things once. The only time that you can continue to sell something is if you resell the account. You can't sell the ships anymore. So like Warbond Idris get bought up instantly. But the credit ones, you could technically keep reselling because you can just keep selling the account. But let's say it's an even number. Actually, it's probably not, but just for the sake of this, we'll say it's an even number. Our credit versus Warbond. So 25 Warbond Idris were just bought. And now they got gifted as standalone ships to another player. So now we've got 50 minus, holy, that's a bad 2. 50 minus 25 equals 25 Idris left. So now this pool only has 25 Idris that can remain in the market because the other 25 just got blown up because they can only be gifted once. So the only way that those locked Idris can be sold again is by selling accounts. Now, a lot of people don't want to sell their account. They want to keep their account because they've been working on it. The reason they're buying a standalone ship is because they don't want to have a second account. These are people who have had these accounts forever. They've got all the cool items, all the special items, and they want it to be on their account. They don't want to have two accounts that they have to manage. So that essentially creates an environment where half of these Idris are locked. They're out of the inventory because they are now in the hands of players who can no longer get rid of them. Which means we now only have 25 Idris in the pool that can be sold. But what about buyer 2? Buyer 2 is sitting over here like, I want an Idris and I want it to be standalone. There's not another wave for another 7 months or whatever CIG decides to do. What am I going to do? So the only option for this player is to go either back to the gray market and buy an account directly, or you can try to go to buyer 1 and try to buy an account from them, because that's the only way you're going to get one. Is you're going to need to buy an account, because you can only gift things once, and the gifting things once is where this all comes together. If you could gift ships, specifically war bond ships, as much as you wanted, it would not be nearly as bad as what we are seeing right now. But because they can only be gifted once, it's essentially like a currency. Think like a Bitcoin, for example. There are a finite number of Bitcoin in circulation. And if magically, for whatever reason, more Bitcoin just appeared out of nowhere and entered the market, it would lower the price temporarily, they would get scooped up, and then the same thing would happen. Prices would raise again as the new market adjusted to the increase in supply. But the demand would still be incredibly high, much higher than the limited increase in supply. And it's the same thing here. The demand for Idris is up here at all times. It never lowers from this. But the supply hangs out around here. So, for example, when we delete 25 of the Idris that are on the gray market, the supply just got cut in half on the gray. Well, and you could really argue it got cut in half again just simply going on the gray. You can make an argument we're like down here. The supply, much, much lower than the demand. Demand up here. It never changes. That's why they get bought so fast. So buyer 2, again, we're going to go back to this. Buyer 2, they want an Idris. What do they have to do? Well, they have to wait or buy an account. And so what does that do? Now the problem is because they can only be gifted once, CIG has essentially created an economic market where they masterfully can control the buying and selling of their items because they control majority of the inventory. Idris are not limited assets. They are not tied to some blockchain. They don't have unique identifiers. They are an infinite asset. It is literally a piece of code that they can just copy and replicate to their heart's content. But they need FOMO. They need you to drool over the idea of having this ship. And if you aren't drooling and the demand isn't there, then they might not be able to sell as much and they might not be able to make as much money. But as the rate of players in the game increases, the demand for the ship increases as well, which means CIG, let's illustrate this better for you guys. So as we play this game, especially like right now, we're getting a huge influx of players. The players in this game is going up like this currently. It's not quite exponential, but it has kind of that curve. The demand for the ships, again, we don't know the supply, so it's hard for us to like graph this out properly. But what we do know is the supply falls far below the threshold of the demand, which means, just for illustration purposes, the supply looks like this. But the supply will continue to go up because it's not an asset that can truly be deleted. Because like I've shown, you could sell accounts, so there is a circulation aspect of it where the supply technically continues to grow as more and more accounts get these on. But the number of accounts that get Idris on their account, whether they buy an account or they get gifted one or they buy it from CIG directly, is far lower than the demand. And as more players enter the game, the demand will continue to rise. You're going to get, let's call it 1 in every 100,000 or 50,000 players who come in, realize they want to drop $1,900 on a ship. Well, they're outpacing their supply, which allows CIG to just inject more and restart the loop. The gray market can't go, hey, there's a shortage in supply, we need to close this loop and just start it all over again. Buyer 1 managed to somehow buy an account from, or buyer 2 managed to buy an account from buyer 1. He's now got stuff. Let me like go put it back on the gray market and sell it again. That doesn't happen unless you're selling accounts, which I don't think happens as much. I think people typically want the standalone ships more, but there are, as we just saw on the website, there's definitely a demand for accounts because because you can buy and sell accounts. You can't buy and sell ships. It's a one and done. You basically, the second you gift that Idris, you've deleted it from the inventory, which is why this is such a genius play. CIG has essentially created an asset that deletes itself from the market. Unlike a Bitcoin that is tied to the blockchain and can be traced and re-injected into the market whenever it wants based on the buyer and the seller, it can't get deleted. It's not something that, it's not a piece of paper that I can burn. It's not something I can throw away. It's tied to the digital world of code and the blockchain, and it can't be deleted. We are dealing with digital assets that can essentially be deleted from the market, which allows CIG to keep this loop open. And the reason this loop is open is because it really should look like this. It's not a circle. CIG controls all of this. They release the ships. They make the money. They control how many of those ships are war bond and can be gifted. They control the fact that only one of them, it can only be gifted once. So they have essentially, by allowing gray markets to exist and by allowing this giftable system where you can gift a ship once, they really created the gray market by doing that. If you couldn't do that, then the gray market would have had a much harder time existing because the only way to buy and sell would be to do accounts, which not everyone wants to do. Like I personally have no interest. I have lots of friends who have used the gray market. To my knowledge, I don't know of a single one that has bought an account. They all buy standalone. Now, like we saw, there's a lot sold out. So I'm not saying that accounts don't get bought and sold. But in my experience, it is a far lower number. So, they control the supply. They control the demand, as we see over here. They control pricing. Because, like we just saw, they just raised the price of the Idris when it released. Now, they do that for a lot of ships. But guess what? They can raise the price of their ships when they know that the cost of their ship is far more expensive on the gray market. Who cares if an Idris goes from 1,600 to 1,900? Because on the gray market, an Idris is selling for like 2,400. Because that's where the demand is. People are spending hundreds and hundreds, 20, 30, 40, 50% markups to buy these ships. And the worst part, it doesn't even count towards your account's funding status. Like, you're not progressing through your concierge tier by spending this extra money because it's being gifted to you. It doesn't hit your account like that. So people are spending crazy amounts of money on the markups. And CIG can raise their price totally fine. It's all good and dandy. So, let's sum this back up. We'll go through like a perfect loop. Yesterday, CIG released a bunch of Idris. Let's say they released 100. 50 of them go to legit accounts, like an account like mine or yours, where we're sitting on CIG's website, we're clicking F5, maybe we had one in a cart from a previous sale, we get lucky. 50 go to the players. 50 go to the gray market. The gray market profits. CIG profits by selling all of these. The gray market now gets an injected supply that's much smaller than what CIG supplied, because normal players manage to snag some. It's not just all bots and scalpers. I do have some friends who get lucky from time and again. So the gray market makes money. Both the company who like runs the website, because I believe they take a cut of the sale, so they make money. The player buying or the player selling the item, they make most of the money. It now goes to buyer one, where we see, we'll call it half of these war bond ships that gets gifted to buyer one are now deleted out of the market because they can no longer be gifted again. So now we've only got 25 ships left by the time we get to buyer two. And what do I mean by buyer one and buyer two? Buyer one is essentially the first wave. The first wave of buyers who scoop them up off the gray market and potentially list them again on the gray market. So buyer two would be someone who isn't buying an Idris that just got bought from CIG's website and put on the gray market that same day. Buyer two is coming in a few days later, or maybe a few hours later, because that's how fast these things go. Buyer two is the second wave of ships trying to be gifted. They can now only see a supply of 25. But they don't want an account. They want a standalone. So this is now deleted. For this buyer, there is zero supply. It's gone. There's no more. So where do they have to go? To the only place that can supply them. No other market can control the supply except for CIG. So this buyer now has to wait for the next sale. They're going to wait for the next sale. They're going to go. So mind you again, we've essentially deleted Idris out of the inventory. They can no longer be sold. They just went poof, gone. Guess who can create more? Guess who has an infinite number of these? CIG. That's basically it. CIG, to sum it up in a couple sentences, CIG loves the gray market because it is a tool for them to delete the supply of artificial scarcity ships, limited hull ships that, by the way, aren't really limited because you can just go spend like $6,000 and buy one at any time. So they're not really limited. But that gets sticky because when you buy the pack, you can't gift a single ship out of the pack. So that's like its own like weird subcategory, which I can get into another video if you guys want. But most people are just talking about the single standalone ships. CIG controls the supply. It can essentially control the demand by making cool promos, cool trailers, announcing new waves. Every time they release a new wave, like an announced waves, people go crazy. They're like, I'm ready to win the F5 war. I fall into it. I've tried multiple times. I'm currently 0-52, meaning I've tried 52 times to win this F5 war, which is what they call it, to buy the Idris. I have failed. I'm 0-52. The CIG controls the supply. They control more or less the demand. They control the pricing. They control how many times they can be transferred. They can delete them out of the inventory because of that limit of one transfer per ship. And then they can recreate that ship and sell it themselves. So let's use Bitcoin again as an example. Let's say there's we don't know who the creator of Bitcoin is, although we suspect. Let's call it Professor X. Professor X created Bitcoin. They created a ton of Bitcoin. They started selling them like crazy. But he made a rule saying that when you sell Bitcoin and you sell it to me, I can't sell that Bitcoin anymore. It's locked there. It can't go anywhere. And the only way to get that Bitcoin back into the rotation, back into the market, is if Professor X issues a new one to replace it. It's like the perfect system. Now, we'll use one last illustration as we wrap this up. Because CIG can delete the inventory, demand, since the game has launched, goes like this. It just goes. As more players come in, the demand for the ship increases. But the supply does not follow a linear path. It goes like this. Very, very small increase because technically there are ways to buy the ship whenever you want. So that is increasing the supply through account selling. So there is a small increase. And then you get the wave. Wave shoots it up. The supply goes up. You continue this again, and over time, you start to go back down. Now, we don't actually ever reach the starting point because you can buy and sell accounts. So then we flatten out again. And then we see another spike, maybe for another wave. And then we start going down again. And then another spike. And then we go down again because they can essentially delete it from the inventory, from the pool. And then it spikes. And it starts going down again. And every time we see a spike is dollar signs, and lots of them. And yeah, that's it. So if you've ever wondered how the whole limited system works in Star Citizen and why CIG likes the gray market, it's because they directly profit off of the gray market existing. Without players buying and selling ships to each other, the supply would just go up and up and up. You would never see it go down. And by it going down, CIG can resell essentially that ship to start to balance it back out again before ever injecting new ones into the supply. Now, I'm guessing they do inject new ones into the supply, but the rate at which they inject new ones is not nearly as high as any other product that traditionally sells in a buy-sell market, because they don't get deleted from the market. But CIG has figured out a way to do it, and it's masterful. For those who are watching, you might think I'm hating on them for this. I'm not. As a backer of Star Citizen, I think it's horribly scummy. But from a business perspective, it's genius. It's one of the best systems I've ever seen. And that's really all there is to it. This is Professor Galley. Follow me on all my socials, X, TikTok, or Twitter if you call it that. Instagram, YouTube. Follow my podcast called the Citizen's Voice Podcast. Find that on X and YouTube. And I will see you guys in the next one.